Okay then, so we've got this coming on. You should be feeling quite chuffed if you have something like this. Every one of you will have a different variation because it's your version of an eye, okay? And it's perfectly all right to make different ones and indeed to mess it up. Now, I practice this all the time because eyes are a bit like trees. They're fascinating when you really, really look closely. So I tend to draw eyes when I'm doodling, just like I draw trees when I'm doodling. So we got as far as this. And then what we do know is the pupil inside of the iris is black. And on most occasions, for most people, they have black pupils. So we're going to add another bit of realism and put in the shape of another reflection. And that can be any shape, but I'm just going to make it like a zigzag line that goes across, as you can see. And I'm going to shade in everything except for that bit I've just drawn. All right. So my aim here is to have a black pupil with a bit of light showing in the middle. All right. And this is where you can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. It's completely up to you. It's your creation. Okay, don't try and make it completely black just yet. You can go back in later when you're playing with detail. Okay, so you've got something like this. Now, unlike this one, which is in the colourful part of the iris, this one doesn't remain perfectly white, all right? Because it's really in a black situation normally, right? So it doesn't need to remain perfectly white. You don't need to be so careful with it. You can just keep it like this for now, right? You'll probably find it gets a bit dirty as you go through your drawing. Okay, so correct your circle if needed. Stand back and have a look. Is it big enough according to the light? Is it small enough? Do you have that little bit of realistic reflection inside? That's cool. So that's our pupil. Now let's tackle the iris. Okay. Now, contrary to popular belief, the iris is not a sharp, clear line into what would be the white of the eye. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a thick line to this. So just taking your pencil, just like you did with the sphere, look what we're doing. We're moving in around the circumference of the iris into the center. All right. We're not doing it willy-nilly. We're just going in the direction that you would see the spokes of the iris working in. Okay. You don't really need to come up to here yet because we'll deal with that in a second. All right. So just go around the edge of the iris, making it a thicker, darker color line. So now what you've got is something like this. Okay, so now what we can do is introduce our blending stump. Okay, these are magical now for you because they'll do a lot of the eye work for you. So what we did was we laid down a lot of graphite on the circumference of the iris. Okay, and what we really want to do is make that blend in further so it doesn't look like a pencil line. Okay, now what you can do with this is very gently blend in the graphite that you've just laid down, always going towards the center of the iris and always taking care not to hit your white reflective spot. Just take your time, doing it bit by bit, and what you should see is the makings of an eye coming towards you as you do it. This is why I like creating eyes like this, because what can appear very, very complicated can be achieved if you just know how, or if somebody shows you. So now you'll be able to impress all your friends in the pub with drawing their eyes. Okay, so what we've done is we've laid a graphite down on this circular bit. But remember what we've actually done, like we were doing the sphere. If I looked at the eye like this, it would be like this. It would be like a concave, and the pupil would be inside there, and you would have put in some thongs around there. Okay, so by doing this, you've given this 3D effect. Okay, and by putting light at the top, you've done exactly like you did with your sphere when we highlighted the very top bit where the light hit it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Now there's a crucial bit of realism that we need. So if the light's coming down, what we've got here on the top eyelid is effectively a bit of a shelf going on. All right, because the thickness of the skin before it hits the eyeball itself is a bit of a shelf. So it would cause quite a bit of shadow in the eye. All right, and it's quite important to put that shadow in now. But we're only dealing with the iris at the moment. So let's put some shadow in. And the way you do that is just by making the top of the iris a little bit darker. Okay, just like we've got here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go so dark it covers up the lines to my highlight. Right. So it's quite dark at the top of the iris. This again is a bit like the shadow that you did on your sphere. All right. It doesn't matter if you've come out a little bit. Can you see that? Just that tiny bit there. It doesn't matter if you've come out a little bit because the whole thing in effect is in shadow. And we'll get on to that in a minute. But for now, we're just drawing the iris. One step at a time. Don't rush it. Okay. And now, guess what? Get our friend the blending stump and very gently get rid of the pencil lines. Very gently. Okay. You can press too hard, and by pressing too hard, you'll flatten the tooth of the paper and you won't be able to go in later to do any corrections. All right. So now you can see you're doing quite well. You've got quite a lot of contrast, you see, and hopefully you can see all the tools that we used in the sphere. All right. So let's go one step further now and add that extra bit of detail to the iris. And that can take the form of either like a flower or the spokes of a wheel. The choice is yours really, but one of the ways you can do it is start by drawing like a wiggly surround to the pupil, just by doing this kind of thing, and go all the way around. So you've got this going on, all right, and you can make it jiggly in that if you want to. Not too dark. That's good. And we're going to add spokes to the wheel. Okay. So when we've got our, let me draw over here just to show you. When we've got our pupil and we've got that bit of line down the middle, let me just scribble that in. Okay, we've got our pupil, which is this bit here. We must always, from now, work from the center of that pupil, right? Which is about here. So then we've got our iris around it, all right? And the iris, we've already made that a thick line. Okay, and we're going to add, and then that bit that we've just put in, we're going to add some spokes to this wheel. Now what you don't do is come from the circumference of your pupil and do this kind of thing, because you'll end up with an odd wheel. What you do is come from the center and come out, always from the center, okay, to add the spokes to the wheel, which will form some of the detail inside your iris. All right, so let's transfer that to here. So you can see where we've done our ziggly line. What you're trying to do is to get a spoke to come through one of the op bits and go into your iris, right? And only do this very, very faintly to start with, okay? So just watch as I do mine. They're just simple straight lines. You can do as many as you like, but not too many. Maybe just follow the lines of a clock. Okay? So we got this going on. Alright? So now what we've done is we've outlined where we're going to be putting details inside of the iris. Now I'm going to take my blended splendor again, my stump, and I'm going to go into my iris and I'm going to blend it out, gently touching the edge of the iris so that it blurs. Okay, and then where I've put my spoke from the iris, I'm just going to flick it out like this. Just going to flick it out like that. So where I'm here, let's use my pencil to point. Say this one, for example, that I'll make quite dark for you so you can see it. I'm going to start there and I'm going to flick it out. And what I'm doing is I'm making this more of a realistic line. Just like that. And I'm going to do that for each one of my spokes. And I'm going to do that from the iris in this time. So from there to there. So all I've done is blended these lines just like this. Okay. Now, it doesn't look very real at the moment. So just like we did with the sphere, I'm going to add a little bit more contrast. Okay. Around the edge. Just like you did before. Taking care to go the direction that you want the iris lines to go. Okay. Just like that. That's right. So we've got something like this going on. Okay. Let's add another little bit of detail now. And you can see that these spokes naturally give you slices of pie. All right. What we can do when the slice of pie hits the pupil is gently curve it. So you're getting, so you got your pupil, slice of pie hits it, you're doing this. You're getting a curve, but ever so slightly. All right. Just like I've done here. Just like that. All right. If your pencil's getting a bit blunt, just spin it around. That's right. Okay. So you can see now, and this is where the fun bit comes in. You can see bits that you would like to work on because they naturally give you a little bit of a pattern, and bits that you can leave white because they're naturally lighter than the others. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to start by adding little patterns. But remember, it always goes towards the center of the pupil. And that's very, very important. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an odd eye. And you all know, you've all seen people with odd eyes. And it makes you look at them. But if you did that on a drawing, people wouldn't believe it. So, see what I've done here too? I've joined them up. You can actually join them up. You can do what you like with them, to be honest. Everybody's iris is different, just like a fingerprint. Okay? So that means that nobody can actually tell you whether you've done an eye that's correct or not. Sometimes when I'm doing portraits, I have to actually alter the eyes to make it look more realistic, because the person has quite unique eyes. Okay, so I've done this bit, and what I'm going to do is blend that together, but always going in to the centre of the eye or from the centre out. But you can see some of it I'm leaving light, and I'm very careful to preserve that, okay, because that's what gives you your 3D effect. Try to get darkness around your white bit of light, because the darker you make around it, the brighter that white will look. Okay, here's a good bit. Take your kneaded eraser and make it into a nice fine point. Just like that. Okay. And with your kneaded eraser, you can go around on the edges of where you drew that squiggly line and just lift off some graphite anywhere you like. Okay. This adds depth and variation to the eye. You might need to rejig it. Depth and variation to the eye, which obviously adds to realism. All right. And there you go. Now, how cool is that? All right. So what we want to do now is concentrate on other bits, because that's like one bit of detail. At the end, you look at it as a whole. Okay. And we'll probably have to increase contrast a bit later on, because contrast, remember, makes things look particularly real. Another thing that people tend not to realise about eyes is they are not white. There is no white of the eye. Okay. So what we have to do is we have to shade the white of the eye. Okay. Remembering that we have a shelf up here. So start with shading the shelf. Okay. Got a bit of a shade going on. Remember, go darker than you think you would, and use your pencil on the side. Okay. And now to get that 3D effect that we were doing, do the bottom and do the bottom. Okay. Now take hold of your tissue, wrap it around your finger, and gently blend in what you've just drawn. You'll find that it looks very, very dark. Not to worry at this moment in time. All right. So you've got this. Now, the reason why I said use your graphite powder sometimes is some people will use graphite powder on a brush to do this bit. All right. And you can do that too, but you do get the same result. All right. So now what we've done, because we've smudged it all with tissue paper, we need to re-emphasize our lines again. Okay. Again, a great time to readjust if you want to. We're dealing with just the white bit of the eye, starting with the top lid, which is in effect a bit of a shelf, so you have a shadow under it. Right. Going to the bottom of the eye, the tear duct. At this stage you can separate the tear duct into whatever shape you like really, but ideally it's always in kind of two bits. You can just bung it down like this, make an S, and then close the other bit off. So you've got this kind of thing going on. What you do then is, without putting any graphite on, grab your tissue and go into drag your graphite into that tear duct. We'll go back to that a little bit later to make it more realistic. But now because we've done that, we can then include that in our correction of the lines. Okay. And there we go. So you can see now, because we've done shading at the top and the bottom, just like we did with the sphere, we've started to create this kind of dome, but looking straight on. Okay. Now remember that our light comes into the eye. It doesn't just strike this little bit. It'll come from all over the place, and when it hits the eye, it will focus on all of the eye, not just the iris. So what we're going to do, this is another reason why you shade out, what we're going to do is put that light in again, just by highlighting it if I needed a eraser. It might even come out to there, look. See what we've done? Good stuff. Now, you'll see that we've got a bit of an eye. We've got the crease in the top of the eyelid, which is this one. And now all we need to do is add some skin. All right. So what you want to be doing is getting the eyes feature to look like this on the face. Say that was a nose. A really poor nose. Your eyes pop out like this, don't they? All right. So you want that feature to happen on the skin. All right. So the first thing we do with that is just shading it. Just gently shade all of it. And again, you can use your graphite powder for this. But what I prefer to use is a pencil, because I can, with a pencil, follow the line of the eye. All right. And that'll pay off for you with a happy accident later on, because some pencil lines will give you a rough skin texture. All right. So just shade around that eye. That's right. Don't forget, you've put in the line, the crease of the eye already. So as you go over it, it'll get darker and darker and darker. That's right. And do exactly the same around the eye. Do exactly the same underneath. But if you can, leave a very small white bit. Don't go quite up to the tear line. Okay? This adds a three-dimensional approach or illusion to your eye. Again, I'm using the pencil in the direction the skin goes in the eye. So you're going all the way around, really. Okay? Okay, so now you see what we've got here. There's a lot of pencil marks on there, so guess what I'm going to do? With my tissue or your blending stump, I prefer tissue because it's softer, is I'm gently going to rub out the pencil lines to make a more even distribution of that graphite. Doesn't matter if you smudge or go over the outside. Just don't get any graphite inside that white bit that you're keeping preserved. All right, and I'm rubbing soft in some places and deep in other places so that I can get different textures. Now it already looks like quite a good eye, but remember, to add realism we can increase the contrast, which we need to do now, because this doesn't look like it dips in at all, for example, and also the shelf doesn't look like a shelf to me yet. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spend a little bit of time darkening the crease of the eye. Darkening the crease of the eye. Now, some people have like a line coming off here. You could just add spider legs if you like, just like this. All right, just as a bit of a realism thing. like I said, I'm going to make my shelf a little bit darker too, just by adding another layer of graphite. Okay. What I'm going to do, that would be a shelf there too, because it's underneath. Okay. This would be kind of light, and this too would be joined onto here. Right, I can draw another bit of tier there. So now what we've got is this kind of thing going on. Okay. Now, need some blending stump work here. Blending stumps are excellent for wrinkles. So for example, if you do a wrinkle like this, what your blending stump can do is it can make a soft line one side and a hard line the other side, just by going over it with the blending stump. And you can see how it's blending. So you've got, I'll just do this so you can see. So you've got a soft line here and a hard line there. We can practice that just with our crease. We've already put in a line like this, and it's very light, so it's just a line of graphite, and then we can make that into a softer line with a darker thing on top. As you can see, what you can start doing then is adding the depth to that crease. So just by having a dark line and blending out the edges of that line, you can see that we're adding some depth here. So then this crease then would go upwards. So let's do another bit of blending on this side, giving us the rounded effect. Okay, and you can have a play with that as you go through, making certain bits deeper if you want, adding some other creases to the eye, just like this if you want, but always blending them in so that you don't have like a pencil line. What you really got is a crease. Okay, and we can add that too here just by adding one of these lines, just like a zigzag line, which people often have under their eye. Okay, and the way you do that again is just follow that line with the blending stump. Okay, if it all looks a bit like pencil lines, just get your tissue and blend it in once again. All right. Okay, now do you remember I said we've got the tier ducks here? We need to add a bit of realism. Go back to your stump, your putty, make a very, very tiny point on the end, and we're going to add a highlight right in the middle. That's quite hard to say. Add a highlight right in the middle of each one of these shapes. So you've got that going on. Okay. I've also noticed that I'm a bit dark on the white of the eye, so now is a good time when I've got the rubber out to kind of lighten things up a little bit. Okay. Now, one thing people don't tend to realise is, as there's a shelf on the top here, there's also a ledge at the bottom of your eye. It's not a line just like we've got here. So we need to add that ledge, and we can just simply do that by just highlighting it gradually, taking your kneaded eraser and removing some of that graphite that's on the ledge. Okay, so you've got a nice defined line here and another defined line here. Some people call this the tier line. All right, and then you can, as with all the rest, just use your blending stump to blend it out. Okay, don't worry, we're going to go back into this afterwards. Now, with a blending stump, you know you've already got a lot of graphite on here, so add some features to the eye. Just like drawing, You might have to press quite hard. Try not to be regular, okay? Just try to be pretty random, but go in the direction of the eye. I'm just going to smooth all that out again. Now, that's a pretty cool eye so far. Let's add some contrast now. So I've gone for my darkest pencil. You can still use a 4B, but if you've got a 6B or something like that, even better. I'm just going to darken everything that should be dark and leave what should be light. Okay, and you can see as I draw this, the difference a bit of contrast makes. Hopefully you can see it. So bear with me. Unfortunately, I don't have any like lift music to play. Well, I do, but I can't abide it. Just so I see a lot of artists online on Instagram and stuff, and their choice of music is awful, and it stops me watching them working. And maybe that's just me. What I'd like to do, as you probably realised, is waffle on a bit. So what we've got here, as you can see, is our iris, and all I'm doing is going back into our spokes of the wheels, joining them up where I want to, or not where I want to, and just making a kind of random picture. I say random, but it is quite regular really. Alright, and this is where you see sometimes you'll see somebody, they have like a dot in their iris or something. Let's put one in. And the reason I'm doing that now is just to show you that you can do what you like. Have an experiment. Okay? Do what you like here. It's your eye. It's your creation. And by concentrating doing it like this, you're actually doing yourself some good. And all I'm doing now is that I'm darkening what was dark to start with and leaving what is light. Okay. Just like, and you get the picture. Okay. So I'm going to leave that at that so that I can get on with showing you the other things. Like this gives me quite a lot of definition. Be aware that deeper you go in here, the older the person. Because as you know, as you get older, well, you might not know, as I know, as you get older, your eyes become more inset. What actually happens is you lose collagen around these things. Alright. So I'm going to add a bit more depth to this, just like we did on the sphere. And I'm going to add some shading, just to give myself a 3D depth effect. Remembering the light source, so you've got a bit of a light going on, hitting your eye around about here. Okay. And that's all I'm going to play with at the moment. What you can do when you have more time is just play with it a lot more. Okay. Playing with this sort of stuff, now that you know the process of it, playing with it will help you quite a lot. Okay. So there's an eye. The darker you go, the better it will be. Alright? Learning now that the eye isn't actually white. So by putting in the darkness, like I said, you go darker than you would kind of ever imagine. By putting in this darkness, what you've actually done is you've given your eye a 3D ball effect. You've done this inside, okay? And you've done that too with this little bit Okay, and you've done that by leaving a bit of a highlight on the eyelid. Yeah, on the eyelid. So if it's not highlighted enough, just give it a little bit of a highlight. Okay, so what you've got now is this, and it still looks a bit weird, doesn't it? You probably realised it looks a bit weird because there's no eyelashes. All right, and then this is the fun bit, because I'll leave you to do the eye. I'll show you how they're done, and I'll leave you to do the eyelashes. So then you can show us when you've done that bit of work. You can upload it into the classroom, and you can show us what sort of eye you've done. At the moment, the gender of this eye is pretty nondescript. Okay, if I add really long eyelashes with mascara on, you know, you probably assume that it's a female. If I do stuff without mascara, it still becomes ambiguous, but it might turn out to be more male. You have a go and decide what you want to do. Eyelashes. Okay, so eyelashes aren't simply, so here's our eye. Okay, eyelashes aren't simply like this. Okay, what eyelashes tend to do is they come out in like an Eiffel Tower shape. All right, so more like this. Okay, in an Eiffel Tower. Some cross, some don't. Some are long, some aren't. Okay, now also, do you remember what we did here? What I said was perhaps a tear line. This is where the eyelashes come out of. So just to draw another sketch like that, so we got our tear line, just to emphasize it. Your eyelashes would start with their root in the tear line like this, and to give it the 3D effect, they come out in a swoop. Okay, and a swoop. Bearing in mind we're doing Eiffel Tower stuff. Look at this, they already look real. Okay, and you do this. Some of the little ones can come out of there just like that, but they must always come out of this tear line. So that on your drawing is here. Okay, now on your upper eyelid, which is like this and it's dark underneath, remember we described this as a shelf. You'd still act as if they're coming out of their tear line. So you end up with this J shape, okay, coming out of their tear line. And remember, the Eiffel Tower, bunch of threes kind of thing. All right, coming out of the tear line like this. Just like that. All right, now do these very, very lightly while you position them. Okay, so let's just do a few for you. So I'm coming out of this tear line, I'm going up really lightly, I'm coming out of the tear line, going up really lightly, and as I'm getting into the middle, I'm still having the crossovers. Right, the same with down below, very small ones, very lightly. So you get the idea, okay? Just to add realism, where you've done, in fact, what you do after that is pick the ones you like and draw them. Come out of the eye and flick to the end. If you do it the other way around, you'll end up with a thick end and a thin bit that goes into the eye. And it's not like that. It's like thick at the bottom, thin at the top. So just do a tick and flick. All right, tick and flick, tick and flick, tick and flick. That's all you need to do. Crossing some over, some a different size, and others. All right. So just to add realism, while I've got you here, is just where that hits the eye, just where your eyelashes hit the eye, just darken it a little bit. Just darken it off a little bit, okay? And then it'll just add a bit more realism, that's all, okay? And then from there, you've already got a pretty decent eye. You can just sit back and have a look and see what else you want to do with it. If you want to make it any more realistic, perhaps make it a little bit darker, spend some time on the spokes or the flower inside your eye, or put some more highlights in, make things even whiter. As you can see, okay, make things even whiter. You can have a play. Have good drawing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you've done. See you for now.